Hello, I'm Angeline Ong, and welcome to Beat the Street, the show that gives you the tradable news and data you need ahead of the Wall Street Open. Coming up, markets pause. US stock investors hit that pause button after last week's Nvidia inspired rally, but we have more earnings and even more economic data incoming. We've got Fed and inflation. The focus turns to the Fed's monetary policy path and awaited economic reports, including key inflation data this week. And in corporate news, Moderna shares indicated lower as HSBC downgrades the US vaccine maker to reduced from whole. Now, a very good afternoon to you. I'm Angeline Ong, and welcome to this edition of Beat the Street. Not long now before Wall Street starts trading, let's have a look at how equity markets are looking, starting with the Dow Jones Industrials. As you can see here, we're seeing this very strong upward momentum, but it has to be said that as of the 13th of February, we did see this dip below the upward trend line that I've drawn there in red. But we then saw it then move further up again. And as you can see here, it's steadily climbing towards the trend channel. And if it breaks through, and it has broken through the upside seen on the 12th of February, and we're now waiting on the next level, which is around 39,470, then we could see further progression upwards in this trend channel. But we're looking for the breakthrough there. It has to be also said that what's interesting on the daily chart is that the RSI is not past that 70 level, so not showing like it's in overbought territory. Also showing you the Tech 100, because it was really Nvidia that had that smoldering rise last week, which then underpinned many Wall Street indices, especially the Tech 100. As you can see there, similar pattern. I've drawn that red upward trend channel, did dip below slightly, but pretty much like the Dow Jones Industrials. It's still looking like there is upward momentum in play, and the RSI not indicating that we are near oversold levels just yet. Let's cross over now to Liz Dierking for the latest. Liz is from Tasty Life and joins us live from Chicago. Liz, it's been such an interesting time. Everyone's been talking about Nvidia, but there are lots of other stocks out with results this week, isn't there?
There are. Thanks for having me. It's great to see you. But it's funny because all eyes have been on Nvidia, and that's all anybody's talking about. But it's kind of like when the left hand is doing something, the right hand is always up too. Last week there's a bunch of EVs that have earnings this week. Fisker and LI are two EVs that are up this week. But after Rivian disappointed and they lost about a third of their value last week, I think you might see some movement in some of those stocks. There's also some retail stocks that are coming out this week. And it's interesting because everybody's taking a look at Nvidia. I always say NVDA on my show, NVDA, and you've got other retailers that are just going in a straight up trajectory. I was listening to Chris on last call talk about Abercrombie and Finch. If you take a look at that chart, it's going through the roof and no one's talking about it. So there's a lot of other things going on in this market, but all eyes are and still are, it's taking a pause today, the tech index and Nvidia.
Now, certainly, Liz, as you were rightly saying, retail is really interesting space that's been sort of drowned out by the Nvidia news. I mean, we had not just like Walmart and many of the other retailers, Home Depot as well, coming out with news last week. But this week, we've got eBay. Any inside track on eBay?
eBay is one of the bigger ones. We will be keeping an eye on it. I know eBay usually kind of stays within its range. Now, I shouldn't say that because this earnings cycle, and we're in the tail end of it, everything has gone, the pendulum swung a lot farther. So every stock has an expected move for earnings. And in years past, I would say 9 times out of 10, they kind of stay within their lane. But this cycle, everything has either gone way up or way down outside of the expected move. So I would say eBay usually stays within its lane, but I'll be very curious to see what it does this week.
Liz, we've also got a really busy economic driven week. We've got PCE, we've got GDP out of the US, loads of data, even without those jobs numbers, which are due next week. What do you expect those numbers to do to volatility?
So I'm glad you brought this up too, because the jobs numbers are next week, so we don't have to worry about that. But the PCE is Thursday. And, there's always economic indicators and the calendar is always filled. But that's the one that I think most people are going to be focused on. And that is Thursday, because the last time something happened, it really brought the market down. Now we'll see what it does, but most eyes are going to be on that. And I think the volatility is going to keep its wings up until Thursday, at least until Thursday.
Thanks very much, Liz. We'll be checking in with you prior to that, I'm sure. Liz Dirking there from Tasty Life, part of IG Group. Now, this week is packed with policymakers as well. In the front and center early on in the week, Fed Reserve Bank of Kansas City President Jeffrey Schmid scheduled to speak at the Economic Club of Oklahoma City. We also are looking out for new home sales figures coming out. All the data in the last week have shown continued resilience in the U.S. economy. Meanwhile, the S&P 500, if we get continued good news, this is likely to help the S&P, which is seemingly melting up in an unstoppable way. If you look at my chart here, it has been making higher highs consistently pretty much since October last year. And also what's been increasingly fascinating is that, it's making higher highs above the 100-day moving average, above the 50 and above the 200, and very much like the Tech 100 and the Dow Jones Industrials and the NASDAQ, otherwise known as the Tech 100. It's still not seen in, at least with the RSI, in oversold territory at the moment, or rather overbought. If you can see here, it's not past that 71 figure even. And to get a further look, insight into where this chart might go, let's cross over to Axel Rudolph now from IG. Axel?
Yes, Angeline, the S&P 500 continues to rise. And as I always say, the trend is your friend, and it's much easier to trade in the direction of the trend than against it. And case in point, the S&P 500 yesterday, or on Friday, I should say, hitting a new record high once again. But what is interesting here is that we may now start to see some softening. And why am I saying that? Well, if you look at the high we made last week, that high was higher than the one made in the middle of February. So we have a series of higher highs on the actual underlying asset here. But if you look at the bottom of the chart, I've got the relative strength index on here, you can see that that highest high we made on Friday of last week was not accompanied by a higher reading of the relative strength index above the high seen here made in the middle of February. So when you have a lower high being made on the oscillator, which is a derivative of the price action here, then that might indicate that the uptrend that we saw in the S&P 500 is not as strong as we might believe it is. So it is an early warning signal of perhaps at least volatility coming out of this market, that perhaps we will lose some upside momentum, but sometimes can actually also point towards a possible retracement against the trend being seen in the near future. Now, you will see here also a trend line that I draw in here. You can see 3 points touching. And I just wanted to mention what to do when a trend line gets broken through, because I've been asked about this quite often. And basically, this trend line is now invalid because you've got price data going through it. So when that happens, what you need to do is simply redraw the trend line from the previous lows through the lows, and then make sure no data falls through it. So in this case, we now got a trend line here going to Wednesday's low. And technically speaking, if you're really pedantic, it's a support line because it's only got 2 touching points and not 3. But we had the previous trend line just slightly above there beforehand, which is why I believe this is still a trend line. But what is important is not the trend line break itself, but the breakup through the trend line and also through the previous relative low. And that was made in mid-February. So yes, we did slide through this previous trend line here, but didn't fall through that low. So therefore, the uptrend remained intact. And then we had this follow through to the upside, take us to new record highs. So that's just a technical aside, which is kind of interesting. But yes, do watch out for potential retracements this week, as perhaps the US PCE price inflation out of the US might lead to some volatility and perhaps not in the direction of the trend in the days ahead.
Thanks very much, Axel there from IG Group. Now let's check on some individual movers. Now Moderna, all sessions on the IG platform, currently on the daily chart showing a fall of 1.8%. Now what's interesting is this fall comes after HSBC downgraded Moderna to cut from hold. And just show you this line here because they also raised the price target in the meantime from 86 to 86 from 75, and that's still below where it is at the moment. The new price target represents a 10.8% downside to the stock's last close. Just showing you an animation there now of what the top lines are. As I mentioned earlier, the price target has been set at 86 from 75, but the key thing that the market is gripping hold of is the fact that they've cut their rating from hold to reduce. And they say, this is HSBC saying that they are skeptical, noting the RSV vaccine efficacy concerns. Now, what's been interesting in this space is that many analysts have raised concerns about faster declines in the efficacy of mRNA's experimental respiratory syncytial virus, this is the RSV vaccine, when compared to Moderna's peers that are producing similar shots like GSK and Pfizer. Now, just also want to check in on mega growth stocks because they had such a winning run last week after Nvidia's results. Let's just check on Nvidia first because it's all sessions on the IG platform. All sessions Nvidia looking like this at the moment, and its shares are up almost 8%. All sessions on the IG platform. Its rise there, as I widen it out for you, looking very much parabolic. Let's look at Microsoft as well, because Microsoft is another one that is all sessions. And just checking in on that here on the daily chart to see if I can give you a view. And it's up almost 0.5%. Ahead of the cash open. So still quite strong momentum, upward momentum there in play. One all session stock on the IG platform that you can indeed trade right now as we speak is Berkshire Hathaway B. Let me just show you the chart because it is currently indicating higher and certainly rising more than 2% on the IG platform. This is after the conglomerate reported its second straight record annual operating profit, thanks to its insurance business. But other than its numbers, what was also key was what the sage of Omaha said. Warren Buffett says Berkshire can withstand even an unprecedented financial disaster, the huge size of the company, leaving no possibility of eye-popping performance, though he hedged. Berkshire reporting $96.2 billion in net profit in 2023. For those of you that follow this stock, Berkshire shares have risen, if you look compounded annually, and let me just bring this back if I may, since Buffett took over. I'm not sure if my chart will let me go back that far, but we'll try for you. 1965, yeah, it won't go back that far, is when Berkshire took over. But I can tell you that in terms of, if you looked at it from a compounded point of view annually, this stock has risen 19.8% compounded annually. And that's pretty good compared to 10.2% on the S&P 500 annually. And before we go, a quick view of Wall Street, or rather the Dow Jones Industrials, as we count down to the open, giving you a 15-minute chart here so you can take a better look at the movement, but really a pause, if you like, after last week's stellar gains. And as I mentioned earlier, the RSI not really yet crossing that line, that RSI line above that 70 mark. And that is it for this edition of Beat the Street, the show that follows the trading action, helping you position yourself ahead of the opening bell. For more trading insight, follow me on @IGCom and @Angeline on Twitter. This is IGTV.